Hey party people. Today we are going to review 2 watercolor sets for my cheap art supply series. We have Crayola washable watercolors. This is the 8 color set. And the Prang washable semi-moist, that's what they call them, semi-moist watercolors. Also the 8 color set. This I got on Amazon for $2.31. This one, the Crayola, I got also on Amazon for $1.89. I'm sure prices vary depending on where you go. Today we are testing on a cheaper watercolor paper. This is the Bienfang 140-pound cold press watercolor paper. It's got a nice texture to it. That's weird because it says 140-pound, 228 GSM, but I thought that 140-pound typically translated to 300 GSM. That's weird because on my other papers, the 140-pound equals to 300 GSM, and this is 228 GSM. And yeah, the paper does feel not quite 140. I think a little thicker than 90 though. I don't know, whatever. It is a definite harder, thicker watercolor paper. This is thicker photocopy paper made expressly for color copies. You can see that flimsiness. So this one I got on Amazon for $4.66, and it has 15 sheets of 9x12 paper. To compare, Arches 140-pound cold press, 12 sheets of 1014 is about $15. And Strathmore 400 series is 140-pound cold press, 12 sheets of 9x12 is about $10. So this is much cheaper. I got a new printer. It is the Canon Pixma MG7720, and I wanted to see if it could print on this thicker paper, and voila! This is my latest coloring page that I am selling on Etsy for Girls at the Beach. You can see how it looks on the photo color copy paper. I would do this for rendering with marker. But look how nicely it printed on the watercolor paper. I'm so impressed. So I don't know if all printers are capable of printing on this heavier paper. I doubt that any printer will print on like super thick, like 300-pound paper. But it printed well on this paper. You know, maybe read a manual, see if it handles cardstock or thicker papers. And when you print on watercolor paper, make sure that you're printing on the correct side. You know, watercolor paper definitely has a right side and a wrong side. This is a first impression, so we are going to paint with this. Notice I have not tried this. And the Prang. I'm going to paint 3-ish figures. I've got these 2, and then I have my gouache palette. It currently looks like this. Dun, 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 dun. It always kind of looks like this. It always has dregs of previous projects on it. Yeah, you know, gouache can be revived, which is what I'm going to do. I'm going to just kind of play with these good gouaches on the cheap paper, and we're going to compare them to the cheap paints and have some fun. Let's start with the Crayolas. Look at this brush. If you watched my interview with Brianna Kranz, you might remember that she tells a story about she had an illustration teacher who only used Crayola watercolors, these pan Crayola watercolors. And I really enjoyed that because people always think that you need something expensive to get good results, and I'm like, no. the way you're going to get the best results is to really get familiar with your medium. I am assuming that he had been using Crayolas for so long that he was really getting, he really knew the ins and outs and how everything was going to behave, and that's how he was able to get the results that he wanted. I mean, my guess is that he really enjoyed the Crayolas and he kept using them until he was able to get the results that he wanted, and he knew the pros and cons of the paints he was using, and so he was able to make them work. I hope a bunch of y'all watched my The Brand Doesn't Matter video, because it doesn't. The only thing that I forgot to mention in that video is about light fastness. Now, I spent my entire, like the vast majority of my career not thinking about light fastness. Oh my god, this brush is the worst. I can't handle it. This is one of my Princeton brushes. My old Princeton brushes. These are from college. I've been hearing rumors that Princeton was taken over, their manufacturing was taken over, and their quality is not that good anymore. And I'm really sad to hear it. But my old Princeton brushes are amazing. So where were we? Oh yeah, we were talking about light fastness. And the thing about I spent most of my career not worrying about light fastness, because think about it. I use markers for quick sketches for design work. And then once I'm done with the project, they go in a folder. And when I do illustrations, final illustrations, you know, for school, of course, they got turned in. They never got hung up anywhere. And then when they were done, they were put in a portfolio book, and people looked at them, and then again they got put away in my portfolio book, and I did very little work that was going to be hung up for a long period of time, where I expected things to stay light fast. So it just never occurred to me. And so someone mentioned in the Brands Don't Matter video that they only really concern themselves with light fastness when they know it's going to be a piece that's hung up. And yeah, that is also how I feel. And that's why I was testing the light fastness of inks, because I know that inks are more of a let's make a pretty picture and hang it up sort of medium. But for the most part, like illustrations for portfolio books and stuff, I don't care. Wow, that is the worst rendering of hair I've ever done in my life. So that's cool. But I was trying to get texture as opposed to a wash. So let's see. Let's see what happens when I'm just painting. Wow. That is some blue. Okay. Alright. What are we going to do about this skin tone problem, y'all? I mean, brown is easy. So you can do a darker skin tone with the brown. That's not actually a bad skin tone. And this is why I don't really love pan watercolors, because it's hard to mix colors. It's not as easy as to just squeeze a little bit from a tube. And someone asked me in last week's basic fashion illustration using gouache tutorial, they told me that it seemed like my gouaches stayed wet in my palette for longer than they were experiencing. And my response to that was, number one, I have a porcelain palette and they tend to keep paints wet longer. That's nice. That's the black and the brown together. See, look at that's nice. That's nice, you know. Oh, and the other thing about keeping paint wetter is I mix up more paint than I know I'm going to use. And obviously, the more amount of wet you have, the harder it is for it all to evaporate. Because I know with gouache, I can revive it again and add more water and mix it up and reuse it. And so, I mean, I'm still using such little amounts of paint. It takes me a really long time to go through a tube of gouache. So what am I going to do about a really light skin tone? Let's see. So if we just use the tiniest bit of brown. Yeah. Oh, that dilutes nice. Look at all these nice skin tones we're getting with the Crayolas. Okay. Oh man, that section was not dry. Oops. When you're painting with watercolor, you see how excess paint is pooling? You know, you want to get rid of that, because then you're going to have darker areas. It's going to dry down to darker areas. So you want to make sure it's like one flat layer. Ugh. I know, I'm so impatient. Okay, let's go back to that hair. So when I paint hair with watercolor, I tend to try to get a more dry texture to make it look like the texture of hair. But it looks like the Crayolas are like, we don't appreciate what you're trying to do here, Zoe, and we're not having it. The Crayolas are not having it. They don't want to be a dry texture. So honestly, like, this black is not black. I mean, you do have to work some water into it, so you're not going to get... It's a very dark brown with like a purplish undertone, which is a nice color, but it's so weak. It's just not black. Let's go in with our shadow color. Mix up a little bit darker skin tone. Layer some shadows here. Oh man, I forgot her face. Oops. Alright, let's let that dry a little bit and work with the Prangs. Prangs have their own brush. This might actually be a better brush because it keeps the point even if I flick it. So let's try out the brush. Brusha, brusha, brusha. Let's try out their black. So the Prang black is very green. Woo! That is not black. That is very, very green. What is happening there? I add some of the brown to kind of tone down the green. Let's see what happens. Yeah, that's closer to black, but it's still really watered down, so you're not gonna get a true black. But it definitely looks better than that thing, whatever that thing is. And in other news, this brush is better than, way better than the Crayola brush. So we're doing a leopard print, so I want to put in like a orangey brown backdrop. So I'm putting in the background of the leopard print right now, and then I'm gonna paint in the shapes with the black once this background color is dry. I still want to try, not quite that dry, but I still want... So this is the brown, which is close to the Crayola black. With hair, you want to work with your paint strokes and always render in the direction the hair is growing. Just a little bit, and I'm going to put in a shadow layer. Let's figure out some skin tone here. I mean, The Prang brown is really ashy, so we're gonna need to add a lot of orange, I think. It's on the rosier side. So far what I'm seeing is that the Prang, did y'all watch my videos? I did 2 videos where I was working with the Artist Loft watercolors, and they had that kind of chalky finish. It wasn't, you know, nice and clean and translucent. It looked kind of powdery. I'm getting that feeling from the Prang, so that, you know, it has a stronger color payout and it's easier to work with. It does have that chalkiness, that powderiness. Can you see the difference between this leg and this leg? Okay, this one looks a little bit like it's got like a white, milky kind of base to it, whereas this looks like a true translucent watercolor. Although, if that's how some of the colors are going to end up, and it looks nice and translucent and clean when you have a lot of water in it. You know, you're not seeing much of that chalky business like you do when it's way more pigmented, like here. This one is bending forward, so the thigh gets cast in shadow, but then this is bending out, so some light will hit this leg like that. And then in the spine, in here like that. All of this tucked in here in the darkness is gonna get darker colors. And then under here. This is not a great brush, but this whole set is $2.31, so this brush is actually not bad. It's actually workable as opposed to the Crayola. I don't know what that is. But you can really see the chalkiness comparison here. This is a mixture of the black and brown colors in the Prang, and this is the black of the Crayola. Okay, you really can see the color clarity here and the chalkiness here. Little espadrilles. Usually with leopard print, the centers of these little black horseshoes are a darker color, so we're gonna get in there all gentle like. Let me know if you want a rendering tutorial on animal prints. I'm not gonna get into that too much right now. All right, what am I doing next? Oh, I'm finishing the Crayola. So I don't like painting next to each other. I like letting things dry completely so that they're not contaminating each other's spaces like that blue was doing with the skin. Ah! See? Good job, Zoe. Good job. Good job, Zoe. Good job. And this blue likes to soak up the water like crazy. Like this yellow, the water's still sitting there. The blue is just like, oh no, that's not. Alright, I'm going to do this figure with my paints over here, left over from previous tutorials. This is a mix of the Nicker and Pabeo gouaches. So we're going to reactivate some of these. Sometimes I take a spray bottle and reactivate. You know, keep the spray away from the paper, of course. Look, see, this is totally dry, and this one really settled into the grooves, and I hate that. So now that I'm using the paints that I normally use every day on this paper, I can kind of analyze the paper for the paper, and it's pretty nice. It's taking the paint pretty well. I mean, I haven't really put it through its paces, like I haven't done a lot of aggressive painting on it, but I mean, look at that skin tone. It looks nice and smooth. So, you know, this kind of thing that we saw, this is definitely a reflection of the paint and not the paper. I mean, you can see the rest of it, it doesn't do that pebbling set, the ink settling into the grooves on anything else, right? So it was definitely the brown on the Crayola set that is really doing that. But it's taking these gouaches that I used just the other day pretty well. You know, when I do curly hair, I tend to get a little bit messy because like really perfectly smooth curly hair looks a little bit weird to me. It looks lacquered and artificial. But I tend to like hair that moves a little bit anyway, even when it's straight like this, so. Little 70s style baby gym shorts with the white binding and with pockets, because y'all know how I feel about pockets. Give me all the pockets. I mean, come on, look at this red payout compared to the Crayola red. I mean, but again, you know, the point of these cheap art supplies is not so I can bash them and say they're not as good as the professional grade, but to help people who don't have the budget for expensive things to figure out what your better choices are. And, you know, I'm thinking that this paper is a good investment. Less than $5 for 15 sheets may seem crazy expensive in the overall scheme of paper, but it's watercolor paper. And, you know, like a really good one like Arches, which is my holy grail watercolor paper. I enjoy both hot press and cold press. That's over $1 a sheet. So that's a good choice for the watercolor paper. I do have other watercolor papers I'll be testing in the future, so stay tuned. But in the meanwhile, I'm going to continue working with this because I think that this one is worth using. It's not, at the very least, it's not making my painting worse, right? So I like that. So the Crayola is hard to work with. It's annoying because it's gummy. That's what I'm realizing. It's a gummy texture, and so moving it around and working with it, is harder the more opaque it is. The more water you use, like this super watered down skin tone, super easy. It looks really nice. Boom. But when you're trying to get like the intense color payout, like these reds, where you're trying to make it look as intensely red as possible, moving the paint around is a little bit difficult. Getting nice, flat, non-streaky color is on the difficult side. You just kind of got to work with it. But I think the results for the price are good. Oh, and another thing about the Crayola is the brown, depending on how much water you add to it, you know, you can get nice skin tones like this and like this. If you start adding the black, you start getting this pockmarking business. But this is the brown diluted. This is the brown diluted a lot. Okay, so you don't have to mix a whole bunch of colors to get a reasonably good skin tone. And I know that is a concern for us fashion illustrators. So that's that. So, you know, for less than $2 for 8 colors, and I don't think it's that much more expensive for more colors. I know that I've seen the Crayola sets come in 24 colors, so that could be fun where you can have more colors to experiment with, and you don't have to try to mix colors in the pan like this and, you know, spend that extra time. Overall, I would say Crayola gets a thumbs up in the budget-friendly paint category. The Prang, the thing is, the Prang is easier to paint with. The color payout is easier. It moves easier on the paper, but you are getting, like, I was trying to layer the black on top of the brown, and this is what you end up with, and that is not pretty. And I know that the Artist Loft was also kind of had this chalky finish, but the Prang, like, it doesn't, I mean, this is terrible. I didn't have any problems like this with the Artist Loft. The overall quality of the Artist Loft was better, and you got more colors for the money, and the color payout was, so everything was a little bit better, even though it had a similar chalky appearance. I would say if you have these two options, I will go Crayola before the Prang. Alright, so those are my first impressions for this cheap art supplies video. Please give this video a thumbs up if you found it helpful or amusing or entertaining or whatnot, or just to encourage me to continue with this cheap art supplies series. This coloring page is available for purchase at zoehung.etsy.com. You know the drill. Go practice. Please read the manual on your printer before you start stuffing it full of stiffer papers and breaking your printer. Worst comes to worst, if your printer can't do that, or if you can't find a printer who can do that, you can just, you know, print this out on regular paper, tape it to the back of a sheet of watercolor paper and trace it out, or just have fun markering directly on the ditto paper. Alright, have fun. Get to work, go practice, go watch a tutorial. Let me know if you want that animal prints tutorial, and I will see you in the next video.